Welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. This week we'll be looking ahead to the big game of the weekend in the BKT United Rugby Championship as Leinster host Munster. We'll also be touching on their respective wins on Saturday against the Scarlets and Stormers. We'll also talk about how Connacht pulled off a great win down in South Africa against the Sharks and whether Pete Wilkins' side can repeat the trick in Pretoria this weekend against the Bulls. And we'll talk about Ulster. They maintained their good start to the season with a win against the Lions on Friday night. Dan McFarland's side have a tough one this weekend, though. They're away to Glasgow. With me today are Bernard Jackman and Johnny Murphy. And fellas, we're going to dive straight into Leinster and Munster this weekend at the Aviva Stadium because, Birch, if there was any niggling worry that there was going to be a bit of a World Cup hangover from the paying public in Irish rugby, a tweet yesterday from Leinster Rugby, 45,000 tickets sold already for the game at the Aviva Stadium this week. Looks like it's going to be pretty close to a full house and no signs of a World Cup hangover.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And look at Leinster's crowds. The crowds have actually been good across the four provinces, to be fair. I've been down the sports ground a couple of nights and it's been excellent. I was in Tone Park last week and obviously Leinster are getting 15,000, 16,000 into the RDS. But to sell out the Aviva this weekend will be brilliant. And I think it's a sign of a couple of different things. There's an appetite to see our current stars and future stars in the flesh, and obviously I think also Munster, having won that semi-final last year, won silverware, the Munster fans feel that they're right back in the mix with Leinster again, which is exactly what you want. And also I know there's going to be a couple of injured, there's a few fellas injured, but you're going to get, I think, two full strength teams playing as well, which is what you want. So yeah, I can't wait for it, to be honest. I think it'll just kick. I know this URC is back up and running, but I think it'll really launch it back. And obviously Europe's not that far away as well, so it should be a great occasion.
Yeah, Johnny, I think I always thought maybe a little bit too much was made of the fact that this was, some people would have said this was like a dying rivalry. Leinster were always winning, but I do think Munster's win in that URC semi-final has injected a new life into it. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking to Munster players and coaches, and I think there's a recognition down in Munster that they probably have a target on their back now. They're seeing teams pull out big performances against them, whether it was Benetton in round 2, whether it was the Stormers even the other day. I know the Stormers are an excellent team, but they were without, their 4 Springbok World Cup winners, but they properly put it up to Munster at Thomond Park. And I think they know exactly what's going to be coming their way from a fired up Leinster team on Saturday.
Yeah, I think, look, the rivalry between it probably did take a dip for a couple of years. But I think this game is, even since I came home in 2010, it's the one that you look for in the fixture list when it comes out at the start of the year. It's certainly, in my opinion, it's the hardest and kind of biggest rivalry derby I've ever played in. And there was obviously ones in England with, Leicester, Moss and Bath and, all those, those historic fixtures. But that night we played in the Aviva when I came home first. I'd never experienced violence like it in my life. It was unbelievable. And I think it's back up to that. And people are really eager. I thought there was going to be a bit of a World Cup hangover, but it seems people are really keen to get back into it and start. It's kind of, I think it's the World Cup experience for everyone has driven everyone's appetite for it. But this game in particular, I think it's one that Munster want. They don't want the semi-final last year to be that flash in the pan win up there. They want to go up. They want to perform and get that win. I think that's the big thing. And I'd say a lot of Munster supporters in particular were probably annoyed about what was being said for a number of years, that rivalry isn't what it is. And then, having won silverware last year, the only team to win, I think, they have a bit of pep in their step and they want to kind of make a mark and have a good performance, but a really good showing from the supporters. So, it is one to really, really look forward to.
And Bert, Johnny mentioned the World Cup there, and that's obviously the quirky little extra element to this game as well, where you do have quite a few players now who would have been cheek by jowl with each other in Irish camp for quite a few, since the middle of June right up until the middle of October. and they're all working for the same team. They're working towards the same common goal, and a few weeks later, they're up against each other, and all that, Irish camaraderie and stuff is going to be parked, and it's going to be warfare on Saturday.
Yeah, and look, that's what you want. Like, by all accounts, it was the closest Irish group of all time. Like, they're genuinely best friends in many cases, and they've left their provincial jerseys behind them going into this World Cup campaign, but they're back on now. They're back on, whether it's red, green, white, or blue. And I think there's always that interesting element of it when you see fellas who are good mates, but they're playing for the province of their birth and representing that province. For someone like Ty Byrne, who's obviously not from Munster originally, but represents Munster like a traditional Munster man. It's great to see them go at each other in a big game. And from the bragging rights to win one of those derbies matches is huge, but also a big performance can go a long way towards getting you ahead of the guy in your place in an Irish jersey as well. So for someone like Jack Crowley, if he comes up against Ross Byrne this Saturday, for Craig Casey, if he comes up against Gibson Park, etc., it's a real opportunity to try and change that pecking order. And I love that element of it as well, not just the two teams, but the individuals within those teams, to see who can perform in front of what will hopefully be a sellout and a really intense game.
Unfortunately for Munster, Johnny, it's looking like they've picked up a couple of costly injuries off the back of that Stormers game at the weekend. We don't officially have word yet that Peter O'Mahony and Jack O'Donoghue are out, but it's looking unlikely that they're going to be available. As of yesterday, Andy Kiriaki said they were still waiting back on scans on O'Mahony's shoulder and Jack O'Donoghue's ankle. They hadn't trained this week, so you would think by this stage of the week, it's certainly they're probably planning without them for this weekend. Whether or not they get them back before the Champions Cup is another thing. In better team news for Munster, Jean Klein is available again. Given potentially losing O'Mahony and Jack O'Donoghue as well, would you be inclined to put someone like Jean Klein straight into the starting team this weekend, or would you try ease him in off the bench?
Well, I think if he has to, he's going to have to play. It depends, obviously, where he is physically. But you look at a second row pairing of Klein and Adogbo, and then you can play Byrne at 6 with Hogner at 7, and Coombs at 8. It's still a fairly strong side. Like, they have that depth there. So I think that's probably given. Ideally, you probably wouldn't want to throw him straight in, but needs must. If you lose 2 guys, that's just what happens, and you're going to have to get on with it. He adds something obviously in the line out. He also adds that experience that probably there's two captains. Jack has captained the team. Obviously Pete is the captain, so they're losing that leadership as well. So someone senior like him coming back in adds a calming influence around line out time. You also, moving Byrne to 6, you have another jumper that you probably lose with Pete. So it just gives a bit more balance to that kind of second row back row unit. If I was Wig, I'd be putting him straight in, but obviously there was a lot of celebration, and he's been out for 3 or 4 weeks. So it just depends on what kind of condition he is in when he comes back in, which I'm sure he's perfectly fine to get 50, 60 minutes out of,
Yeah, and Birch, like, it's so hard to second guess what the coaches are going to be doing around selection. We're seeing a lot of rotation at the moment because you're in this block of pretty much week on week from the opening weekend of the season back at the end of October right up until mid-January after the second round or the second block of Champions Cup games. So it's so hard to actually predict what way a coach is going to go around selection at the moment.
Yeah, it is. I think they'll both try and get their settled first choice 15 in place quickly, not just for this weekend, but obviously as we get there's another round of interprovincials next week, and then you're into Europe, and that's a challenge. It's a challenge for those coaches. Leinster were able to integrate quite a few of them last week, and there'll probably a couple more maybe coming back this week, and Roundtree doesn't have as many, but John Klein has been a key part of Munster over the last 4 or 5 years, and he'd want to get him in. Having said that, I'd actually love to see a Dogbo and Tom Ahern play second row against Leinster. I really like both of them. And I think it'd be an unbelievable opportunity for them to test themselves. And you could have the back row that Johnny mentioned with Byrne at 6. But look, it's very hard to leave John Klein out, especially in a match of this magnitude. But if he's not 100% right, they have more depth now than they've had in a long time with those two young locks coming through.
Particularly for a Dogbo, actually, Birch, because he started all 5 games so far this season. It would be a great reward to put him back out there now this weekend in the biggest game so far of the season against Leinster.
Yeah, I think he deserves it. He's been outstanding. He's so powerful, so direct, very physical, and has looked so comfortable, like being a regular first team player for Munster. But this is just another level. This is another chance for him to show he can step up, and I know they're very excited about him in the Munster squad and in the management there, and it'll be really interesting to see if he gets to start or gets game time this weekend, because I think he's definitely showed that he's definitely ready to have that opportunity. He doesn't have to be ready to come in and dominate it, but it will be another nice step in his development.
After the game against the Stormers, Johnny, Graham Roundtree was saying that it's the big focus this week is probably going to be the breakdown, because it's the key to everything for Munster. It's how they get their fastball. It's how they slow down the opposition then when they don't have it as well. And if you look back at when the sides met in this game back in May, the penalty count was a massive factor. Munster came out 12-5 on the correct side of that. I think 2 of those Leinster penalties, 2 of the penalties Leinster won came from the 3rd minute onwards. So Munster ultimately starved them of penalties and starved them of real attacking opportunities. And if you look back in that game, it's one Munster probably should have won by quite a decent score rather than Jack Crowley's late drop goal. How important is that now for Munster to get right? And if they don't get it right, are they ultimately in a bit of trouble?
Yeah, because I think a team like Leinster, they also rely heavily on their breakdown to create that fast ball. So if you can't slow that down, you're going to be under pressure defensively, and then obviously you can't generate that quick ball if you're not whatever. Different people have different terms for your rails, your barrels, or your inside clean, that kind of stuff. If that's not active and that's not where it needs to be, you can't ramp up the speed. You can't control the tempo of the game, play fast, and then play it quick when you need to, when you're exiting. You've no control over the tempo of the game if you can't control the breakdown. So yeah, it is a huge. It is going to be the winning and losing of the game, and I think that power that a Dogbo has there. I think he's very dynamic for such a big guy. And also you look at someone like, the center, you look at there, and it's a lot easier to get good quick ball when your carries are good and you go forward, and it allows your cleaners get in there easier and make sure that no one can get at it. You look at the carry that Nankivell had before their first 3 points of the game. He's settled in very well, really strong, abrasive ball carrier. That go forward is going to be really, really important. And yeah, they're going to be doing a lot of work on it. But I think both sides will, because of how they want to play and their ability now, particularly Munster, their ability to play with, play that extra pass, play more, play more to width. And if you don't get your breakdown right, you can't do any of that. What was your
take on Saturday, Birch? 10-3 against the Stormers. It was a funny game where I was there, and I think TV didn't do the conditions justice. They were absolutely brutal. It was a really, really tough wind to judge. The rain it wasn't constant, but when it fell, it was really, really heavy throughout the game as well. And while I think you can pick out positives and negatives, I think for Munster, where they probably blew that chance to score early in the second half, and if they score there, they probably pull away with the game as well. But then on the flip side, they were under enormous amounts of pressure and dealt with it, and ultimately held a brilliant Stormers attack to just 3 points.
Yeah, I would disagree with you about the Stormers being a brilliant attack. I think they're.
In general,
Yeah.
rather than on Saturday.
No, absolutely no. You're right. They're full of X factor, and very powerful. And I think the fact that neither team really could do much ball in hand, tells you that the conditions were as bad as they were, because they both have a positive attitude towards playing, and Munster really struggled to get into the 15s, and because of that they got caught behind the gain line a lot. And in fairness, the Stormers' defense is the most aggressive of any of the four South African franchises. And I thought Munster just accepted that, and then varied up their kicking game pretty well. Turned down the points at the end of the first half to go to the corner and started to get on top of the line at maul, milked 2 penalties, and then the yellow card, and then obviously ended up with a dog ball getting over for some good play with the forwards. But really, I think bar that moment, and bar the moment where Evan Roos gets held up, there was very little attack from either team in the 22. The game was played between the two 22s, and it was just a game that Munster couldn't get that 2-score lead, and at the end, they needed, they were hanging on to a certain extent. But I think it was a good gritty win for Munster, obviously in the back of having lost the week before, and it's probably the ideal preparation for this week. Getting into a battle, finding a way to win it. They're obviously light on tens at the moment, so Crowley getting through that game, even though he had heavy strapping on his knee, and shipped some heavy knocks. He looks like he's fit for this weekend. I thought Jack O'Donoghue's injury looked horrific at the time. I was commentating on it, so I'm not sure what people saw on the camera, but it was a clean out of the breakdown. His legs seemed to get trapped, but in fairness, he jumped up, he hobbled back into the defensive line. But yeah, I'd be shocked if he played this week. Peters looked innocuous enough, really. It was in the lead up to a dog boat try, but obviously the fact he didn't come out after half time, there's a little bit more to it than that. And it's Munster are tipping along quite well. I think the Leinster game, Leinster don't defend as aggressively as the Stormers on the outside, so they will be able to get more passes together and try and stretch Leinster on the edges and get into a little bit more of the shape. I think Nankivell looks really impressive, and obviously his relationship with Frisch could be really exciting as it builds. And then
sorry to interrupt. He looks really, really good defensively as well as with the ball in hand as well, I think.
Yeah, no, he's very aggressive. He's actually he's not that big up close, but everything he does is powerful, and he wins collisions. Looks really composed, and I think Fekitoa ended up being a really key man for Munster at the end of the season, and obviously they made the decision early to replace him with Nankivell. So I think it's the fact he's settled so quickly is a real boost for him and gives him some firepower.
You did mention on Against the Head though on Monday night, you still probably would fancy Leinster by a couple of tries this weekend. Is that more so down to where Leinster are at the moment rather than where Munster are?
Yeah, look, I think Leinster should be, like, they got caught last year in the semi-final. Fair play to Munster, but generally early season Leinster are very hard to stick with, and obviously they have that home advantage. They have more internationals, and I think that they should be expecting to win that game and get a bonus point. I think that's the level that they have tended to be at the last 4 or 5 years, early season, and doesn't look like the season is going to be any different. I know they lost the first game against Glasgow. The challenge for Leinster is to have a game that can win trophies at the end of the season. And I think if they weren't dominant this weekend, it would be a bit of a worry, to be fair. I think they still have the best squad in the competition. I said it, the most internationals. And in a league game, you would expect them to win. It's the knockout stuff that's the problem for Leinster.
That a fair summary of it, Johnny? Yeah, I think bang on, really, to be honest. Like Leinster are still the best team, on form over the last number of years. Unfortunately they don't have any silverware, from last year, but I think, week in, week out, they are the best team in the country. It's You can't but disagree with that statement. That's just the reality of it.
And obviously brought in quite a few internationals back on Saturday against the Stormers and fitted in quite nicely. But again, 2 weeks ago when we had the two on, we were talking about Jamie Osborne, and here we are talking about him again. Just week on week, just looks more and more comfortable in it, and it was really interesting to see him look so at ease as well as all the internationals were back. When he had Gary Ringrose outside and when he had Hugo Keenan behind him, when he had the dominant pack in front of him, that he was still more than comfortable being an integral part of the team, rather than just kind of slowly drift back and almost kind of accept that the big internationals are back now.
Yeah, I think, and it's kind of the subtleties around his game. Birch alluded to it during the week, that he has that all-round game. But when you analyse him and you player cam him, his carry, his real aggressive carry off a line break for one of the tries in the first half. And then it's his left foot options that he gives you, and he's booming balls down the far end of the pitch on exits. And then one of the biggest things for me is probably that people don't give him credit for is his subtlety and kind of in his passing game. And you look at the hands after kind of Jimmy O'Brien gets his hands free, he picks up, and it's his pump and pass that allows, it sucks that final defender in, and then Deegan goes under the post. Like, it's those subtleties that he has to his game that people don't kind of realize. Close quarters, he can get his hands free, but his passing is top notch. He is an all-rounder, and I think he showed that the other night. Just with those 3 or 4 different involvements around tries or exits, he's showing everything in a moment what he can do. Be it carry strong because he's a big lad, as I said, his exits, and then his kind of just his pump and pass to create that space for Deegan with simple hands to score underneath the posts. He does have it all, and he's an incredible communicator. I've witnessed that firsthand. That's massive. That is huge, because a lot of people that kind of fall short is their communication defensively and in attack that can kind of let them down. But he's a quiet chap, probably off it when you're talking to him, but when he's on the pitch, he comes alive, and that can separate a really good rugby player to an excellent rugby player, and he has it all.
Out of curiosity, for both you nearly, who would you have kind of down from your careers have remembered as being like massive talkers and big communicators on the pitch? Maybe players that we might not necessarily think are, absolute superstars. Obviously like a Johnny Sexton is probably going to be well known for that, but maybe someone you might have played with down the years that isn't as heralded, but when they're out on the pitch, the way they communicated and kind of navigated their way around the pitch was second to none. Shane
Jennings was ridiculous. He effectively told you where to be, what to do, running commentary, and understood the game incredibly well. He was the best communicator. Easton C was very good as well, but Jennings was outstanding.
You were nodding along, Johnny.
Yeah, I learned a huge amount off Johne for those first 2 years in Leicester. Real hard taskmaster, but he was incredible. And 2 other 12s that I would have played with, Aaron Major in Leicester, but also someone Lemmy Maffey in Munster when I came there. His chat was unbelievable. Johne was ridiculous.
How did Sam Prendergast fare on a big start, Birch? It was a big opportunity for him getting a start with pretty much a first choice backline behind him and a first choice pack in front of him. And it was quite interesting to see how Leinster very much deliberately worked out their halfback pairings, where they had Sam Prendergast and an experienced option of Gibson Park in front of him. And then on the bench, Fintan Gunn at scrum half making his debut, and he has Ross Byrne alongside him to navigate his way through it.
Yeah, I thought he had another really positive outing, and I think Gunn as well. Like, there's been so much about Sam, and rightly so, but I think Gunn, when you look at the profile of the scrum halves in the country, with Gibson Park, Connor, like Cooney, Caelan Blade, and their age profile, like they're all over 25, 26, and then you look at who could come through, and obviously Luke McGrath has an injury at the moment, and Gunn was an outstanding schoolboy. He was up there with Sam in terms of being one of the most dominant schoolboys I've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. And then he's obviously played 20s last year, had a couple of niggles, plays for Turn now, but he's a guy to watch. He's a very, very accomplished player, and him and Sam could eventually end up being the halfback partnership down the road.
Could well be. Johnny, you had Sam in Newbridge College, yes?
Yeah. Sam again, communication off the charts. What I liked about Sammy the other night was his, a couple of things, how flat he can take the ball to the line and still get the ball away. And then you look at, for Ringrose's try, his ability to play off the line when the space is at edge, and there are loads of numbers just to get the ball there. It was another really good outing for Sammy, and I think he's in a really good spot now. But yeah, to back up Birch on Fintan Gunn, having coached against them and watched them for 3 or 4 years in the school space, he's an exceptional talent, and he's going to go from strength to strength with the exposure that he's going to get now. And Luke's injury gives him an opportunity to get a bit more game time and be around the environment more and more. And yeah, I think he's also another one that's going to go strength to strength. He's a top quality player.
One last bit I want to mention, Birch, before we move on to Connacht, and I think just with the way the World Cup went, we're all on the lookout for what's the depth chart at prop going to be over the next few years. Jack Boyle, we've had a decent sample size of him now with Leinster over these first few games. What have you thought of his first 4 or 5 matches?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his. Have been. I thought we'd see more of him last year, but he had some niggles, to be fair. But he's got this. He actually's got much bigger physically, and he's a really dynamic ball carrier. And I think he's taken his chance. Obviously, he was off the bench at the weekend, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's starting to see him at match 23s even this weekend, or certainly in Europe before Christmas.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how he gets on. We'll move on to Connacht now, because they did have a fantastic 13-12 win against the Sharks on Saturday. 4 wins out of 5 for them, continuing their excellent start to the season. So I was doing the Munster match down in Thomond Park on Saturday, lads, and I was watching back Connacht on Monday evening, and I got to just after the 50-minute mark. The Sharks had gone 12-10 in front. Connacht still had a man down after Oisín Dowling was in the sin bin. The game had been played pretty much exclusively in Connacht's 22 for those 10 minutes of the second half. And just given the flow of the game, I was sitting there wondering, how on earth do Connacht actually win this game? Because obviously I knew the final score by that stage. And even then, 53 minutes, the Sharks get a penalty just inside the 22, straight in front of the post. And they call for a scrum when they haven't actually had any real scrum dominance. It's just that they had an extra man. Connacht win a penalty from that, and the game obviously flipped there. The point I'm kind of getting round to, I suppose, Johnny, is while this was a fantastic win for Connacht and really, really dug it out, surely they're going to have to step it up quite a few levels if they're going to have to take a win out of Pretoria this weekend against the Bulls.
Yeah, I think looking back at the game and after reviewing them over the last couple of weeks, the week over in Glasgow in particular,
or Edinburgh.
Pardon?
Edinburgh.
Sorry, Edinburgh. Yeah, Edinburgh is that they, when they'd score off their kickoffs, they'd either wouldn't exit properly or knock on a kickoff or something. Where this week, I think one of the biggest momentum shifts in the game was when they score, when they concede a try, they go down the far end and get a penalty turnover in front of the post straight away. So that try actually only counts for nearly 2 points. It only counts for 2 points. So it's one compared to where the last week where they were kind of they just really struggled with those little kind of momentum shifts. You mentioned that scrum, that was a big momentum shift for them. They pulled it out of the bag when they needed to, but yeah, I think they need to get back to kind of where their performance was against Ulster and how they were playing there, from an attacking standpoint. But it's a big win away from home, not playing that well. And then little moments, kind of people that I'd say the coaching staff are very frustrated for, they can see their second try, and there's a bit of some people thought, but like Turner O'Halloran could tackle the winger and he just stops. Like, he's a really experienced Irish international. He should be playing to the whistle there, regardless of what he thinks. So there's a couple of things like that they need to get right. I thought JJ was good again, really good from the tee, and interesting, he had 10, where kind of that's his out and out personal preferred position. So look, good teams win ugly, and particularly away from home, and that was one that they can say they did that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned like Tiernan O'Halloran with that just kind of not playing to the whistle, and I think Scott Fardy acknowledged it as well on Monday in their press conference, how the crucial try they conceded against Glasgow was because Glasgow had a penalty under the posts, and the Connacht players automatically assumed he was kicking for the posts and left space out wide, and they took a quick tap and scored out there. But Birch, I was probably a bit harsh on Connacht there to open it like that. But
they were poor, and I think they accept that. But it's a big win for them at the end of the season. That 4 points away to the Sharks could be absolutely massive. Look, I think they're a top 8 team now, and obviously it's a straight shootout now for top 8, and the 4 Irish provinces will be top 8. But to get that start 4 from 5, could have got something, at least a draw out of Edinburgh, I thought, and to win with your worst performance of the season is a big step forward for them, and they will have to up it against the Bulls. The Bulls are a better side than the Sharks. Obviously, conditions will be more difficult. I think it's quite warm in Pretoria this week, and obviously the altitude, but they're on a bit of a freebie, really. If they were to get a win this week, or even get 2 points out of it, I think it'd be an incredible start to the season. And yeah, they're playing. In general, they're playing good stuff. They said they weren't good at the weekend, but they're playing good stuff. And I think, to be fair, the Sharks are a basket case at the moment. Well, it can't get any worse, actually, but you'd have to imagine they will get better as they get their internationals back and settle down. But for John Plumtree, he must be so frustrated with some of their attack. It's just, they have no respect for the ball whatsoever. But from a Connacht point of view, yeah, great start to the season.
What they did really well, Connacht, though, on Saturday, Birch, was they did an absolute number on the Sharks line-out. I know we've been talking about back rows playing in at hooker over the World Cup, but I'm sorry to say Dylan Richardson is no Dion Fourie with the way that line-out functioned on Saturday. Connacht properly tore them apart there.
Yeah, massive, and that's Muldoon's area of expertise and area of responsibility, so he'll be over the moon. I think that Connacht defensive line-out statistically has been one of the best in Europe over the last year. They've really focused on that, and they mix up block defense and mirror defense really well, and get into the minds of the line-out callers. And once they found that area of weakness in the Sharks, they were ruthless, and it was the most important factor in them getting that win, I think, was their ability to unsettle the Sharks at line-out.
How do you think they approached this week then, Johnny, where I think one of you kind of said, I can't remember which one you said it a few minutes ago, but they effectively have a bit of a free hit this weekend against the Bulls, where even if they come home and they've lost 4-2 after 6 matches, and already having your trip to South Africa behind you is a pretty solid record to have. Bear in mind also they've got Leinster next weekend at home. Do they start looking ahead to the Leinster game with their team selection this week, or do they just go all out for this game and throw everything at it and see what sticks?
I'd say you'll probably see some level of rotation, you would imagine, given the Interpro. But it is they can just go out and play and try and ramp up the tempo. And get rid of those kind of silly errors that we've already spoken about, particularly defensively. But like from an attack perspective, they can go out and just go full metal jacket and just play and try and get their new system against a good side in difficult conditions. But I wouldn't expect too much rotation, but I'm sure there'll be a couple of players that will come back in this, that will come back in again for the following week, given that it is Leinster and it's coming in. If they're going into Europe, then obviously they don't want to go kind of 3 and then another 2 on the bounce. So they'll have to kind of manage that. But yeah, like it's just a completely free shot. But I think the things that they'll be really working on are, those silly things defensively that we've already spoken about, switching off over the last couple of weeks, that will be a big bugbear of some of the coaching staff. Like they're kind of non-negotiables. They don't require any talent. It's just keep doing your job until signal comes in or the whistle goes. I think if they can work on that, they'll give themselves an opportunity.
And last point on Connacht, then, one good element so far this season, Birch, as well, has been they've done a little bit of rotation here and there as well, and they look like they've added depth in positions where they need it. We've mentioned JJ Hanrahan already, and that's probably been the big one over the last few years, that if Jack Carty's name wasn't on a team sheet, you were instantly a little bit fearful for their chances. We've seen Colm Riley come in at scrum half and do a pretty good job as well. We were all wondering what was going to happen at scrum half with Kieran Marmion being gone. If Caelan Blade wasn't going to be around, were they going to be in a bit of trouble? At second row, they've rotated pretty much every game with Joe Joyce, Oisin Dowling, the Murray brothers in there. So they've got options. Sean O'Brien was playing at number 8. They have added, just piece by piece, a little bit of depth, and they just look stronger than that probably they have if they do hit a few injuries.
Yeah, and I think the academy there. So Joe Joyce was obviously brought in from Bristol and Irish qualified, so he replaced Fafita, who was non-Irish qualified, and unfortunately Fafita had struggled to get kind of an injury-free run, so he already looks like that's going to be a big improvement to them. They have done a great job being able to mix and match, so like guys like Dowling and Prendergast and Hawkshaw, who were in the Leinster system, have gone down there and done really well. And then you've got the local kids, the Rileys, the Devines, the Fords, the Kilgallons, who have come through the Connacht pathway. So they've more depth than ever before. And then you mentioned it, like I used to say, like they had 2 kind of good hookers, like established hookers, experienced hookers in Delahunt and Heffernan, and then they had Blade, Marmion, but they didn't really have the two 10s, and obviously now they've let Marmion go to Bristol, which obviously freed up a bit of budget, and I think they've spent that then in having a backup to Jack, of someone of the experience of JJ, and obviously then they're going to go with the young 9s behind Blade. And I think that's smart. Because Blade is clearly number 1, and will play 60-70 minutes anytime he's fit. So but they now have the ability to rotate or have cover if Jack is injured. And JJ's has been great, and he's really loving it as well by all accounts. And he's travelled. He's been to France. He's been to Wales. He's been to England. And this is probably his last move. And he's adding value at the moment to that Connacht team.
And the last point, actually, Johnny, on Connacht is they're 4-2, or they're 4-1, sorry, after 5 rounds. And Finlay Bealham only came in just last weekend. Bundyaki and Mac Hansen haven't seen the pitch yet.
Yeah, they have. Bert's already said they're really developing a big squad down there. Their scrum is a weapon, and with the 2 other, with the 2 guys to come back in, that's going to step up another level. So yeah, like they're a genuine top 8 side. You're going to see them in the playoffs. And who knows how far they could get if they keep this run on the board. And as I said earlier, good teams win when they don't play that well. And I think that'll be really good for their mental space to get a big win away from home when they know that they can improve so much on small little things that don't really require a whole lot to fix. But yeah, been really impressed with everyone, even listening to Peter Wilkins after, after he speaks very well. He seems like, and I only know from watching interviews, but seems like a really decent guy, and someone that you'd like to work with. Again, that's only from interviews that I'm seeing, but really good communicator, and yeah, like they seem to be really pushing forward, and with the young coaching group they have, I hopefully it shows that it can be done, and really kick forward with them.
On to Ulster then. 24-17 winners against the Lions last Friday night, away to Glasgow this weekend, which is a nice tasty little game. Birch, not firing on all cylinders, Ulster, so far this season, but 4 wins out of 5, getting the job done nicely. They've rotated heavily, and they're in a spot now where they're getting the heavies back. Marty Moore is back from injury. Stephen Kitsoff is in this week. Ian Henderson and Rob Herring have been back a couple of weeks now. The outlook is starting to improve on Ulster compared to maybe what we were talking about a couple of weeks back.
Yeah, look, at points wise, they're very happy. I think Dan would still be a little bit concerned about some of the elements of performance. I don't know defensively if they're where they need to be. I think Dave Ewers the other night was exceptional. He's exactly the type of player that they probably needed to replace Coetzee with. When you think about their pack, they're probably a little bit short of big carriers since Coetzee left, and he gives them that. And Dwayne Vermeulen didn't really give it to them as they would have expected them to be fair. So that's a positive. Kitchoff will come in. Obviously, they're hoping to get a lot from him on and off the field. Marty's back. They've got loads of hookers. You just still wonder. I still wonder about at 10. Who's going to end up there. I sense Flannery's been getting a lot of game time, or a lot of minutes so far, and that's good because he is talented, but didn't really when Healy and Jack Crowley have developed, he was kind of caught in no man's land, and maybe this is the year for him to show what he can do. They've got lots of outside backs that but just have I seen enough of them this in the first 5 weeks to say they're trophy winning team? No, I haven't really. Now, can they become one? Yeah, for sure. But at the moment, they've got probably more points on the board than their performances warrant, which is really good for Dan. But it's definitely he'll be looking to find an extra 25%, I think, in their performances quickly, because the way they played against the Lions the other night won't be good enough to get points in the Irish interprovincials or in Europe.
I might double back on the Billy Burns, Jake Flannery issue there. It seems like there's been a pretty straight rotation so far this season, and they've rotated their team generally quite a lot over these first few games. One for both. Who would you, if you were the coach and you had a big interpro tomorrow afternoon, who would be your starting 10 if you were coaching Ulster? Flannery or Burns?
Well, you're probably going to go with your experienced one in this context. But at the same time, if they're going to back Flannery, they need to do it for a 3 or 4 week period so that he can learn rather than chopping and changing. So a lot of the things, like, say, I thought he did well enough the other night. Some of his exits probably he can control, but his basics in attack in terms of, for their 2 tries, just his handling, his organisation around that, chasing them to the edge, and on their try that they scored over, and then James Hume's try in the first half, it's well worked. He makes that call, and then he makes that pass for Hume to score. But it's just, they need to give him an extended period. So pick a block and say, right, there you go. There's 4 weeks. Let's see how we go. When we get better, you can manage a game. You can try and control it. Putting him in a melting pot game against, in a big interpro match, that'd be huge for him. It's a big gamble, but they have to. Sometimes you have to delve. Sometimes you have to jump off the cliff edge and back someone in that context. And having Billy on the bench, you can change it with 30-20 minutes to go. But yeah, for me, if they want to develop someone, they need to give him a block, 3 or 4 games where he's gonna start. He can make mistakes. He can learn from them. It's not a case of, well, you made that mistake, right, you're off. He's a really talented player. Would have seen a lot of him before he moved up there in the AIL when he was playing for Shannon. When Shannon got promoted 2 years ago, he was a huge part of that. They beat us in the final, and he was one of the main reasons. The ball was on, he had it on a long string and he put it wherever. He just controlled the whole thing. So he just needs an extended period where he's going to be backed by the coaching staff. That would be my opinion.
Yeah, just on the Ulster 10s, it's not your stereotypical 10 challenge, because both the 9s that tend to play, Cooney and Doak, are bigger players in terms of their game management than in the other 9s around the province. So a lot more responsibility goes in those 9s. So sometimes we can be critical of the 10, or wonder about why the 10 hasn't had a big influence on the game. And effectively, it's not the same question that we ask when we see other teams play, just by the way the Ulster play. And I think if Flannery was to play in a big game, in a big European game, whatever, there wouldn't be the same pressure on him that might be if he played for Connacht or for Munster or Leinster. It's just worth making a note of.
Yeah, it's very French the way they kind of play through 9 so much, isn't it?
Yeah, very French. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just Ulster have to I suppose get a little bit further to make it seem like the right way to play. It's down to the nature of the skill set of 2 lads, and the goal kicking as well, obviously. That they're very good goal kickers, which is obviously a bonus, but maybe it or puts a cloud over our impression of the impact their 10s are having because they're not goal kicking.
Yeah. The final point I'll bring up, because we are running out of time. I wouldn't offer investment advice too much, Birch, but I'm telling everyone, buy stock in Scott Wilson, because that price is only going up.
He can carry, can't he? No, he's impressive.
It's just been really like I don't want to get into is he going to be an international team in the next year or two, but it's just been really, really enjoyable to see someone play in a real kind of carefree way, not to be confused with careless, but carefree. No. Over his first game and a half.
Yeah, he looks like he's loving it, and he has loads of talent. And Dan will manage him well. I think Dan will bring him through. And yeah, it's great. It's great to see, I suppose, some exciting Ulster forwards, come through, because it has been very much weighed towards their back line over the last 5 or 6 years, and he obviously had some back rows, but I've enjoyed his impact so far, and I'm looking forward to following his career.
He's been looking really, really sharp, not just with the ball in hand, Johnny, but like around the dirty work as well.
Yeah, look, he's another one that you can add to that list that we've already spoke about it, those younger guys that are this exposure. And these years are great, those World Cup years, because you unearth all these kind of younger guys. They get regardless of whether someone is missing in their position or not, they get coaches are more likely to rotate and give younger guys that opportunity, just with the way the season is. And he's certainly taken it so far. So hopefully he can continue with that.
Yeah, he's been very, very impressive. Well, listen, that's where we will wrap up for the weekend. We've got Leinster and Munster, I should say, at the Aviva Stadium this Saturday. Ulster away to Glasgow, and you also have Connacht away to the Bulls on Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. kickoff. That's live on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player. Birch and Johnny, thanks a million for joining us on the pod this week, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Neil.